Daniel Adeyemi stood at the balcony of his high-rise penthouse, gazing over a sea of city lights. From this vantage point, Lagos looked like a planet of shimmering stars beneath his feet. He exhaled, feeling an odd mixture of triumph and unease swirl in his chest. In less than an hour, his engagement party with Tiwa, a woman whose family's social influence reached the upper echelons of political power, would begin. Billionaires, celebrities, politicians, and paparazzi would all be there to capture the moment. A discreet knock on the door broke his reverie. His personal assistant, Chinedu, peered in. "Sir, the guests are arriving." Daniel nodded, stepping back inside. He straightened his crisp navy tuxedo and forced a broad smile. This was exactly what he had once dreamed of: wealth, influence, and a fiancé straight out of society's top tier. Yet, despite the grandeur, something felt hollow. Descending the private elevator, Daniel spotted Tiwa in the lavish foyer. Draped in a glittering silver gown, Tiwa exuded confidence, her chin raised in the poised manner she had perfected since childhood. She beckoned him closer. "Daniel, the press is outside." Her tone, while calm, carried a silent expectation. "After we greet the major sponsors, we should do a quick photo op. My father is on the way." He nodded, though his heart was not in it. He scanned the party, taking in the swirl of refined chatter, the clink of champagne glasses, and the soft hum of jazz floating through the air. Expensive floral arrangements lined the marble floors, and waiters in tailored uniforms offered canapés atop silver trays. The entire affair exuded glamour. Tiwa laced her arm through Daniel's. Together, they moved toward the door where camera flashes erupted in quick bursts. The flicker of lights felt overwhelming. If there was one thing Daniel had learned after achieving billionaire status in the cutthroat tech world, it was how to pose and project confidence at all costs. As they stepped onto a specially constructed stage, Tiwa's face glowed under the spotlight. "We want to thank everyone who came tonight to celebrate our engagement," she began, her voice crisp and polished. "It's an honor to have the city's finest gathered here." Daniel's mind drifted as she spoke, remembering a very different crowd, one from years ago, when he was just a dreamer in threadbare jeans, scraping by on half-baked app ideas. He had always wanted success but never imagined the cost. Now, as the crowd cheered Tiwa's words, he sensed an inexplicable restlessness. After the applause, they descended the stage to mingle. A handshake here, a superficial laugh there, a witty comment with a local politician. Daniel followed the motions with a practiced veneer. The question gnawed at him: how did I get here, and why do I feel I don't belong? At one point, he stepped into the quieter part of the mansion's expansive kitchen to catch a breath. That was when he saw her. Amara. Dressed in a simple catering uniform, her hair pulled back, her hands plunged into a sink of sudsy water. She was washing dishes among the staff, her belly visibly round with pregnancy. His heart stuttered. For a moment, Daniel forgot how to breathe. He stood there, silent as the two made eye contact, her gaze calm, yet distant. She didn't speak. She just turned back to the soapy plates, continuing her chore. In the background, the party's music throbbed, but in that small space, time seemed to stand still. He felt a sudden rush of emotions: confusion, shock, guilt. What was Amara doing here at his engagement party? And why did the sight of her, pregnant and toiling away, fill him with indescribable regret? He swallowed, stepping forward tentatively. He wanted to speak, to ask her 1,000 questions, but the words lodged in his throat. All he managed was a feeble whisper. "Amara." She didn't look at him again. Instead, she focused intently on the dish in her hands, the gentle clinking of porcelain the only response. The kitchen's chatter, the hiss of steam, the clang of pots, the murmur of cooks, blurred into white noise as Daniel stared at Amara. He felt as if he had glimpsed a ghost. In the main hall, Tiwa's laughter resonated, but Daniel's feet remained glued to the kitchen tile. He was anchored by memories of a past he had worked very hard to bury. He remembered the first time he met Amara, all those years ago. She had been an art student with a gift for painting and an unrivaled passion for color. He was then an aspiring tech entrepreneur. They shared cramped apartments, late-night brainstorming sessions, and an unwavering belief in each other's talents. They were unstoppable until he walked away. He cleared his throat, his voice rough. How are you?" Amara turned off the faucet and set a plate aside, her motions slow and deliberate. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but laced with steel. "I'm working, Daniel." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I can see that. But, why here? Why this event?" She half laughed, though it held no humor. "It's a job, same as any. I need the money." Something twisted painfully in Daniel's chest. He inhaled deeply. You're pregnant. Is it?" She cut him off with an icy glare. "Don't," she warned quietly. Then, just as smoothly as she had turned to him, she turned away, lifting another plate to rinse. Feeling an enormous weight on his conscience, Daniel reached out to touch her shoulder. She jerked away, nearly sending the dish in her hand tumbling. An older woman from the catering staff hissed, "If you're not helping, sir, please stay out of our workspace." Before Daniel could answer, Amara shot him a final, unreadable glance and left the sink area, disappearing through a side door that read staff only. For a long moment, he just stood there, emotions swirling. Then he heard Tiwa's voice from the hall. "Daniel? Daniel, are you there?" He forced his mind back to the present, stepping out quickly before Tiwa found him in the middle of the kitchen. She was smiling but gave him a curious look. "What are you doing in here?" "Just needed water," he lied smoothly, gesturing at a glass. "It's hot with all those people." Tiwa nodded, accepting his explanation. They stepped back into the main event hall, where an endless parade of acquaintances demanded their attention. Still, Daniel's gaze kept drifting toward the hallway leading back to the kitchen. A quiet dread coiled inside him. He was no fool, he guessed the child had to be his. The timing lined up too perfectly. Months ago, a small rumor had reached him that Amara had left art school, struggling financially after their breakup. He had brushed it off, deciding it wasn't his business. But it was, wasn't it? He realized now, with a pang of regret, that he should have reached out. Now she was pregnant, working as a dishwasher at the engagement party of the man who once promised her the world. If the tabloids found out, it would be a field day. But beyond the scandal, a deeper question stirred: what if this child truly is his? The night wore on, but Daniel could hardly focus. Political figures tried engaging him in discussion about the upcoming election. Tech investors wanted updates on his latest venture, rumored to be valued in the billions. Even Tiwa's father, Chief Olawale, gave a speech praising Daniel's accomplishments and promising a bright future for the newly engaged couple. Daniel managed half smiles, but his mind was on the ghost in the kitchen, Amara, the ex-love he had convinced himself he had outgrown, now reappearing at a moment that threatened his carefully constructed life. As the party lights dimmed and the last of the guests filtered out, Daniel found himself pulled between two worlds. One was the glittering future he'd built with Tiwa, the other a past he'd abandoned. And Amara's silent presence was a glaring reminder that no amount of fortune or fame could truly erase the consequences of broken promises. Long after the last guest left, Daniel lingered in the now empty ballroom, scanning the vicinity for any sign of Amara. The once bustling space was silent except for the faint hum of air conditioning. Flowers wilted in their vases. Crystal glasses sparkled under chandeliers, waiting to be cleaned. Chinedu approached him. "Sir, it's quite late. Should I have the driver bring the car around?" Daniel paused. "No. Not yet. Has the catering team left?" Chinedu glanced at a clipboard. "Most of them, yes. I believe a few are still in the kitchen, handling final cleanup." Daniel's heart thumped. "I need to check something. Wait for me in the lobby." He quickly navigated the winding corridor to the kitchen. There, under fluorescent lights, he spotted Amara finishing up. She wore rubber gloves, her uniform stained with traces of the evening's lavish feast. Despite the exhaustion lining her face, she carried herself with quiet dignity. Daniel cleared his throat, stepping forward. Amara. She didn't look up. I thought you'd be with your fiancé, she said flatly, her tone as distant as the far side of the moon. I just wanted to talk. Talk? She pulled off one glove and dropped it onto the counter. Turning to face him, she locked eyes with him. What's left to say after all these years? He took a slow breath. A lot, actually. I didn't expect to see you. You just disappeared. And then. Her voice trembled, though she kept it under control. I disappeared? Daniel, you left me. We had those grand dreams, remember? I was working 2 jobs to help you get your startup off the ground. Then, when it took off, you vanished. One day, you sent a message, I found new investors in the US, I'm leaving in the morning. Sorry, I can't do this anymore. That was it. Daniel swallowed hard. The memory was painful. I didn't know how else to do it. Everything was happening so fast. The opportunity was massive. And I knew if I didn't jump on it, it might never come again. She gave him a tired, hollow laugh. Well, you certainly landed on your feet. A billionaire, an engagement to a woman whose family wields half of Nigeria's influence. Meanwhile, me? She gestured at the soapy sink. I took a different path, apparently. He felt a pang of guilt. What about your art? You were so talented. Her eyes flickered with bitterness. Life got in the way. As it tends to, when you don't have the luxury of dropping everything to chase success overseas. Silence hovered between them. He glanced down at her pregnant belly. Amara is the child. She folded her arms protectively over her abdomen, lips pressed together. It's none of your concern. But if it's mine. She shot him a fierce look. Don't dare. If you wanted to be in my life, or any child's life, you would have stayed. Or at least kept in touch. But you left me alone, Daniel. I owe you nothing. He clenched his fists at his sides, unsure how to rectify the wounds. I'm sorry, he whispered. She huffed, picking up a towel. Your apology changes nothing. He stood rooted, helpless. She turned her back on him to finish cleaning, effectively ending the conversation. Standing there, Daniel felt as if his entire world had splintered. He had pretended that leaving Amara was a necessary sacrifice. Now he saw how deep that cut had gone, for both of them. Finally, he walked away, the hollow echo of his shoes on the kitchen floor matching the emptiness he felt inside. Outside, the city lights flickered as if mocking him, you have everything, yet you have nothing. Back in his penthouse suite that night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He paced the balcony, gazing at the city below, a tapestry of headlights and neon signs. He reached for his phone, flicking through old photos on a rarely used folder. And there she was, Amara, younger, wearing paint-stained jeans, a radiant grin on her face as she displayed her first commissioned artwork. His mind wandered to the cramped studio they once shared. He could still smell the aroma of acrylic paint and instant noodles. They had barely enough money to buy materials. Whenever he found a new coding gig, they celebrated with cheap takeout. He would watch her paint, marveling at how she could transform an empty canvas into a world of color and emotion. She, in turn, encouraged him to keep coding even when investors slammed the door in his face. In those days, success was a distant dream. They survived on passion, each fueling the other's belief. One night, after a particularly painful rejection from a venture capitalist, Amara placed her hands on Daniel's shoulders. "We are enough," she said softly. "No matter how many times the world says no, I believe in you." The memory stung. The shame of having walked away from that unwavering belief. He recalled what he had told himself at the time, "It's best for both of us if I grab this opportunity." But in truth, a small voice inside him whispered that he was afraid that if he stayed, he might never break free of the cycle of struggle. As the hours ticked by, Daniel collapsed onto his plush couch, swirling whiskey in a crystal tumbler. The normally soothing warmth of the liquor offered no comfort tonight. Why did Amara show up now? Was it truly a coincidence she was hired to cater? Or was some cosmic justice playing out? Around 3 a.m., he finally dozed off. His dreams were chaotic fragments. He saw Amara laughing in that old studio, then flashed to Tiwa gliding through a sea of paparazzi. He felt torn in two, one half pining for an unfulfilled promise, the other trapped in a vortex of high-stakes wealth and ambition. The sun rose before he found any real rest. When he woke, bleary-eyed, a sense of urgency beat in his chest. He reached for his phone, scanning his schedule. He had a meeting with top investors that morning, then a luncheon with Tiwa's father. After that, wedding arrangements with Tiwa herself. In each of those events, he'd be the polished billionaire fiancé. But there was another pressing matter, Amara, and the possibility that he was going to be a father. Tiwa sat at her favorite cafe, a chic spot overlooking the lagoon. The morning light bounced off the water, casting dancing reflections onto the cafe's minimalist walls. She sipped her green juice, scanning a meticulously organized wedding planner. Flipping through the pages, she mentally ticked off tasks, venue, caterers, dress fittings, guest lists, invitations. Her approach was methodical, almost militaristic in precision. Daniel arrived, looking preoccupied. He took a seat across from her and inhaled the aroma of coffee as he tried to refocus on the conversation. "Sorry, I'm late." The meeting ran over. Tiwa gave him a tight smile. "You look tired." He shrugged. "Just a lot going on." She closed the planner, folding her hands over it. The engagement party was a success. My father was thrilled with the turnout. He said you handled the press quite well. Daniel forced a smile. "That's good to hear." Tiwa reached out, placing a perfectly manicured hand on his. "Daniel, is everything all right? You seem distracted since last night." He contemplated telling her about Amara, about everything. But how would Tiwa react? Her father, Chief Olawale, was a power broker who had facilitated some of Daniel's biggest deals. This was not just a romantic engagement, it was a merger of two influential families. Admitting to a past lover and a potential child could explode into scandal. "I'm fine," he answered too quickly. "Just the stress of the new tech release, I guess." She nodded, her eyes scanning his face as though trying to read between the lines. "I'm here if you need to talk," she offered, her tone softer than usual. "Thanks," he murmured. She resumed flipping through her planner. "Our wedding date, my father suggested something in 6 months. But considering your IPO and other commitments, maybe we push it to next year? We want it to be perfect, after all." Daniel found himself numb. He replied with a polite "Sure, whatever you think is best." Meanwhile, his thoughts drifted. What if by next year, I'm a father to a child Tiwa knows nothing about? Tiwa frowned slightly. "Could you at least pretend you're invested in this?" "We're planning our wedding, Daniel." He snapped back, forcing a laugh. "Of course I am. It's just, you're far better at these details. I trust you." Her face softened, the small tension disappearing. "All right. I'll finalize the schedule, talk to the florist, and confirm with the event designer. Just be there when I need you for fittings and press interviews, okay?" Daniel nodded. "Absolutely." They left the cafe soon after, Tiwa stepping into a chauffeured car. Before it pulled away, she rolled down the window and offered him a radiant smile. "We're going to create the most elegant wedding Nigeria has ever seen," she declared confidently. Daniel watched the car merge into traffic, an uneasy feeling lodged in his stomach. He was slipping deeper into a gilded world orchestrated by Tiwa and her family. Where would Amara and her unborn child fit into that perfect picture? Could they? He began walking back to his own car, mentally juggling everything that lay ahead. For years, he had believed that success demanded sacrifice. But the cost might be spiraling into something he could no longer control. Later that day, Daniel found himself staring at a private investigator's phone number on his desk. The glossy business card had been handed to him by a friend long ago, in case you ever need discreet intel, the friend had said. He picked up his phone and dialed, heart pounding with each ring. After a short conversation, he set up a meeting. He tried not to dwell on the morality of investigating Amara without her knowledge. But the questions swirling in his mind left him no choice. If the child was his, he needed to know. An hour later, he met with the investigator, a stern-faced man named Ekeen, in a quiet, upscale lounge. Ekeen listened intently as Daniel described what he needed: discreet background checks on Amara, possible medical records, address, anything that might confirm how far along she was in her pregnancy. Ekeen nodded, slid a contract across the table, and said, "I'll handle it carefully. And keep the results confidential." "Thank you," Daniel murmured. Guilt gnawed at him. He hated stooping to this method, but with no direct cooperation from Amara, he felt cornered. Once the wheels were in motion, Daniel tried to refocus on his daily obligations. But the routine felt surreal. Board meetings blurred together. Press engagements felt like a facade. Every ring of his phone made his pulse spike. He dreaded the knowledge he'd soon receive, yet desperately wanted it. Days turned into a week. Tiwa busied herself finalizing wedding details. Daniel drifted through a parade of social and corporate events, but his mind was always elsewhere. Finally, one evening, as he was reviewing pitch materials in his office, his phone buzzed. "Ekeen." He answered, his voice subdued. "Yes. Sir, I have information. Are you available to meet now?" Daniel inhaled sharply. "Yes." "Where?" They arranged to meet at a dimly lit restaurant off the beaten path. Over a silent meal, Ekeen handed Daniel a folder. Inside were photos of Amara entering a prenatal clinic. Her medical records indicated she was around 7 months pregnant. The gestational timeline aligned exactly with their last encounter before Daniel fully disappeared from her life. Daniel stared at the documents, his chest pounding. He felt simultaneously relieved and anxious. He did the math in his head. She must have realized she was pregnant shortly after he left. Ekeen cleared his throat. "I gathered no evidence of another man. Neighbors report she keeps to herself. She works 2 part-time jobs, one with a small catering company. She rents a modest single-room apartment. Seems financially strained." Daniel's breath caught. "She's alone?" "It appears so." The folder's contents glared at him, confirmation that the child was indeed his. A swirl of emotion welled up: guilt, sorrow, protectiveness. "Thank you," he said hoarsely, sliding the folder back. Ekeen nodded. "I'll provide an invoice. If you need more." "No," Daniel cut in. "That's enough." After the investigator left, Daniel remained seated in the corner booth, the weight of the truth pressing down. He was going to be a father. The knowledge flooded him with conflicting feelings, a flicker of joy overshadowed by the reality of the situation. Outside, the night sky glimmered with the same city lights that once signified his success. Now they seemed to mock his attempts to outrun responsibility. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to Amara's contact, a number he hadn't dialed in years. His finger hovered over the call button. But fear gripped him. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, stepping out into the cool air. Deep inside, he knew ignoring this new truth wouldn't make it go away. The next step was inevitable, even if it threatened to unravel the life he had meticulously built. A few days later, Daniel orchestrated a discreet visit to the catering company where Amara was employed. He waited in a sleek black SUV outside their modest offices until she emerged. She was wearing a simple blouse and slacks, carrying a stack of papers that looked like menus and invoices. The late afternoon sun cast a warm hue around her, highlighting her growing belly. Seeing her like this stirred something deep within Daniel, a sense of responsibility, even awe. Stepping out of the car, he approached her cautiously. "Amara." She froze, turning to face him. Surprise flickered in her eyes before it hardened into wary annoyance. "Following me now?" He offered a pained smile. "I needed to talk to you somewhere private. I have a driver waiting, or we can go to a cafe. There are things we need to discuss." She grimaced. "I can't. I have to drop these at the office, then head to another job." He swallowed. "I'll drive you." "Please." Reluctantly, she let him escort her into the SUV. The interior was luxurious, all polished leather and tinted windows. She sat stiffly, hugging her papers to her chest, her posture shouting distrust. Neither spoke during the short drive, tension crackling in the air. Once they arrived at her destination, a small administrative building, he offered to wait while she ran her errand. She said nothing, just walked inside. When she returned, Daniel mustered the courage to speak. "I know about the pregnancy," he said quietly. I got confirmation." Her face paled, her voice icy. "You hired someone to spy on me?" "I'm sorry, but you wouldn't tell me anything." "I needed to be sure." She snorted softly. "You always did value your data more than people's feelings." He flinched. "It's not like that." She dropped her gaze to her belly. "Then what is it like, Daniel? You come here in your fancy car, wearing your expensive suit, prying into my life. Why?" He ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. "Because I want to help. If that child is mine, I want to be involved." She turned away, gazing out the window at the bustling street. "You left when all I had was a suitcase of dreams and you. Now you think you can just waltz back in?" He inhaled shakily. "I know I can't fix the past, but I can do something about the future." They sat in silence. A group of schoolchildren chattered happily on the sidewalk, while a hawker tapped on the window, trying to sell phone chargers and snacks. Daniel waved him off. Amara exhaled, her eyes misty. "Do you even love this child? Or are you just worried about your image, your precious reputation?" I love the idea of having a child with you," he confessed quietly. "It's complicated. But I don't want my child growing up without a father." Her lips trembled. "It's always about what you want, Daniel." "Let me prove it's not," he pleaded. "Let me be here for you. Let me support you financially, emotionally, however you need." Shaking her head, she opened the car door. "Your money can't undo what you did." She stepped onto the curb. The driver started to call out, but Daniel gestured for him to remain silent. Amara leaned down to speak through the open door. "Stay out of my life, Daniel. I've managed this far. I don't need you." Then she slammed the door. He watched her walk away, a storm of regret brewing in his chest. Despite his wealth and power, he felt utterly powerless to heal the wound he had caused. Undeterred, Daniel tried again. Over the next week, he tracked down Amara's modest apartment. He found it in a rundown building near the outskirts of town, far from the shimmering skyscrapers he was used to. At first, she refused to see him. He left grocery bags at her door, dropping off vitamins, healthy snacks, and even some art supplies, just in case she ever found time to paint again. One evening, after his repeated knocks, she finally opened the door, arms folded across her chest. "You're relentless. What do you want now?" He held up a tray of homemade food, something he had asked his personal chef to prepare. Thought you might like a break from cooking. Her scowl softened, but only slightly. She let him enter the cramped apartment. It was sparsely furnished, with a battered couch, a small table, and a corner dedicated to painting supplies. A half-finished canvas rested on a makeshift easel. The image depicted a swirling mass of blues and greens. Daniel recognized the style, Amara's trademark brushstrokes, swirling with emotion. He gently set the food on the table. I know you don't want me here, but I just want to make sure you're okay. She stared at the food, then at him. I'm tired of your grand gestures. He looked around, noticing the stacked bills on a table near the sink. A pang of guilt twisted in his gut. He had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, while she struggled just to keep the lights on. Let me help, he said, voice quivering. She slumped into a chair, exhaustion etched into her features. I can't trust your help. Last time I let you in, you left without a backward glance. His chest tightened. I know. And I'll spend the rest of my life making amends if I have to. A tear escaped her eye. She brushed it away before it fully fell. You talk about amends, but you have no idea what I went through. Do you know how it feels to wake up and realize you're pregnant, and the man you love is gone? Daniel swallowed hard, a lump forming in his throat. No, he admitted, feeling the weight of her words. I don't. Exactly. She sighed, resting a hand on her belly. I don't know how to forgive you. Not yet. He sat down across from her, carefully placing his hands in his lap. I won't push you. But let me at least be here. They talked quietly for half an hour, mostly about practical matters. Daniel asked how her doctor's visits were going. She answered curtly. He offered to cover the medical bills, she refused. He asked about her future plans, she changed the subject. Still, in those strained exchanges, Daniel saw a glimmer of the Amara he once knew, the fierce, passionate artist who had believed in him when no one else did. The old flame of their connection flickered beneath the layers of hurt. Before leaving, he turned at the door. If you change your mind about any help, or if you just need a ride to an appointment, call me. Anytime. Okay? She nodded stiffly, not meeting his gaze. He closed the door gently. Outside, the streetlights buzzed in the night air. He stood there for a moment, wrestling with a confusing tangle of hope, shame, and longing. For better or worse, he was back in Amara's orbit. And though the road to her forgiveness stretched far into the distance, a part of him refused to abandon it. Several days later, Daniel received a call from a private number. He picked up, heart pounding. This is Amara, came the voice on the other end, quiet yet resolute. He sat up straighter. Yes. I agreed to a paternity test. I have an appointment at a clinic tomorrow, she said. If you want proof, you'll get it. A surge of relief and anxiety flooded him. Thank you. Thank you. The next day, Daniel met her at the clinic, located in a serene neighborhood with tall palm trees lining the driveway. The interior was bright and clean, with motivational posters about healthy pregnancies. The two of them barely spoke as they waited in the reception area. Amara wore a loose-fitting dress, glancing occasionally at her phone. Daniel fiddled with his watch, the ticking of the seconds amplified in his mind. Eventually, a nurse called them in. She explained the procedure, a simple blood draw from each, plus a non-invasive prenatal blood sample from Amara to test fetal DNA. Amara stared at the floor, Daniel at the ceiling. When it was done, they walked outside, blinking in the sunlight. Daniel wanted to say something, anything, to cut the tension. Do you need a ride home? He asked softly. She shook her head. I'll manage. He fished into his suit pocket for a small slip of paper. Here's the clinic's code. We can each access the results online in a few days. She hesitated before taking it. Their eyes met, and for a split second, Daniel caught the faint vulnerability in her gaze. "Thanks," she whispered, then turned to leave. The days until the results felt like an eternity. Daniel threw himself into work to dull the anticipation. He finalized deals, gave interviews about his upcoming IPO, and posed alongside Tiwa at an exclusive fundraiser. On the surface, everything looked picture-perfect. Yet inside, he felt a gnawing impatience, a desperate hope that the test would confirm his suspicion. When the call came, Daniel was in the middle of a board meeting. Seeing the clinic's number, he excused himself abruptly and dashed out to the hallway. The moment he heard the nurse's voice, the paternity test returned a positive match. He felt dizzy with both relief and trepidation. He thanked the nurse and ended the call, leaning against the wall. It was real, he was unequivocally the father. No more speculation. No more illusions that maybe the child wasn't his. He realized with a start that he had just become a father to a child not yet born. The board meeting behind the glass door continued without him, a swirl of executives in suits discussing figures and forecasts. In that moment, none of it mattered. He was a father. Later that same day, Daniel sat in his plush office chair, eyes trained on the cityscape outside. His phone buzzed incessantly with congratulatory messages about the positive steps for his upcoming tech IPO, rumored to be one of the largest in Nigerian history. Investors clamored for confirmation, journalists pestered for quotes, and Tiwa texted him about a high-profile wedding caterer she'd found. He set the phone aside, mind fixated on something far more personal. He was going to have a child, and he was determined to be involved, but how? That evening, he invited Tiwa to dinner at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. As they dined on gourmet dishes, Daniel tried to keep conversation light, but his hesitation didn't go unnoticed. "You're not yourself," she remarked, swirling her wine. "Work stress?" "Something like that," he replied, forcing a half-smile. She leaned closer. "I've been meaning to bring this up. My father mentioned a few business contacts who'd love to collaborate on your IPO. It could be a major boost if we link up with them before the public offering. Think about it. Imagine the headlines when we merge our families and our fortunes." Daniel nodded distractedly. His mind jumped from the swirling possibilities of a major financial leap to the simpler question of how he would co-parent with a woman who currently wanted nothing to do with him. When the dessert arrived, Tiwa's phone rang. She excused herself to answer, leaving Daniel with a moment of solitude. He considered telling her everything. Part of him wanted to come clean right here, right now. But doubt paralyzed him. Tiwa's father wielded enormous influence, controlling corporate and political strings that had, in many ways, paved Daniel's path to billionaire status. Would they accept the child? Or would they brand him a liar, a cheat, and sever the ties that propped up his empire? The risk was colossal. The deeper truth was that Daniel feared losing Tiwa's connections almost as much as he feared losing her. He realized in a flash of shame how entangled his love life was with his business life. Was he that man who prioritized fortune over fatherhood? Tiwa returned, smiling apologetically. "Sorry, had to take that call." "Where were we?" Daniel exhaled and shook his head. "Nowhere. Just discussing the future, I guess." She laughed lightly. "We have a bright one ahead. Our wedding, the IPO, soon, will be unstoppable." He forced another smile, but his chest felt tight, his conscience heavier than ever. That night, as he lay awake in his penthouse, he realized he was reaching a tipping point. Sooner or later, he'd have to choose between protecting his child and protecting his image. And for the first time, he truly wasn't sure which route he'd ultimately take. Days turned into a nervous blur. Daniel juggled 1,000 responsibilities, secretly texting Amara every now and then to check on her well-being. Her replies were curt. He prayed she would one day trust him enough to let him see the child once it was born. One evening, Daniel returned from a late business meeting to find Tiwa waiting in his penthouse living room, her eyes cold as steel. A single photograph lay on the coffee table, a snapshot of Amara, pregnant, walking into a clinic with Daniel at her side. His heart dropped into his stomach. Tiwa. She lifted a hand to stop him. So it's true, she said, voice shaking with suppressed rage. You have a love child out there? He closed his eyes, inhaling slowly. How had she found out? Perhaps her father's network of informants was at play, or maybe some paparazzo had snapped a covert picture. Tiwa, please, let me explain. She snatched up the photo. Why else would you be sneaking into a clinic with a pregnant woman? I recognized her. She was at the engagement party in a staff uniform. Daniel sank into a chair, head in his hands. I didn't plan for this. It all happened before we met. I wasn't aware until recently. Tiwa let out a hollow laugh. And you never thought to tell me? What about trust, Daniel? You've humiliated me. My father's name, our family's reputation. Do you have any idea what a scandal this will be if it goes public? He looked up, eyes weary. I'm sorry. I was going to tell you, but I needed to handle things carefully. Amara and I have a complicated history. Complicated, she repeated, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Spare me the details. Just tell me one thing, are you certain the baby is yours? He nodded once, solemnly. Yes. I had a paternity test done. Tiwa fell silent for a moment, eyes glazing over. Unbelievable. She pressed a hand to her forehead as though fighting off a migraine. My father will be furious. We're on the brink of one of the biggest corporate expansions in recent history, and now your dirty laundry surfaces. You realize he can't abide a scandal like this? Daniel stood, stepping forward. I never wanted to hurt you, or your father. But this child. It's my responsibility. I can't just ignore it. Tiwa stared at him, her expression a mix of anger and shock. Don't you see the position you've put me in? The press will have a field day. Billionaire's secret child with a lowly caterer. The headlines write themselves. He swallowed hard. We can manage the narrative, maybe. But I'm not going to abandon my child. She clenched her jaw, color draining from her cheeks. I have to talk to my father. You and I will continue this conversation later. She stormed out, leaving Daniel in a wake of swirling guilt and fear. As the door slammed behind her, he realized the carefully constructed life he'd built was on the verge of crumbling. And yet, a flicker of resolve bloomed within him. He was done running. In the days that followed, Daniel braced for the storm he knew was coming. Tiwa and her father, Chief Olawale, summoned him to an urgent meeting at the family's private estate, a sprawling mansion surrounded by manicured lawns and guarded gates. Daniel arrived, his shoulders tense. The butler led him to a grand study filled with antique furniture and imposing oil portraits of generations past. Tiwa stood at one side, her eyes stony. Chief Olawale, an older man with an air of regal authority, sat behind an ornate desk, fingers steepled. Sit, the chief commanded quietly. Daniel obeyed, perching on a leather armchair, feeling like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. Chief Olawale regarded him with a measured gaze. I'll get straight to the point. My daughter informs me you have a complication from your past. A child with someone else. Daniel cleared his throat. Yes, sir. I only discovered it recently, but it's true. I apologize if this causes any embarrassment. Embarrassment? The chief's tone was icy. My family is on the brink of merging resources with you, forging alliances that will shape our future. Now I find this potential scandal lurking in the shadows. Daniel, you've disappointed me. Daniel swallowed, remembering how much he owed the man for various business connections. I didn't plan this. It just happened. Tiwa stepped forward, arms crossed. Father, we should tell him about. Silence, the chief interjected, raising a hand. He fixed Daniel with a hard stare. You have a choice. Either sever ties with this woman and her child quietly, or watch as I withdraw all support, business, social, everything. Your precious IPO, the deals we set up. They will crumble. And so will your engagement to my daughter. Daniel's jaw dropped. You're asking me to abandon my own child? Chief Allowale's eyes narrowed. This child is a liability. If you bring that child into the public eye, it jeopardizes my family's reputation and your own enterprise. No one wants to invest in a scandal-plagued fiasco. Especially not with the sums of money involved in your upcoming IPO. Tiwa interjected, her voice edged with desperation. Daniel, please listen to my father. We can fix this. We can pay the mother off. You don't have to be involved. No one needs to know. Just trust us. Daniel's heart pounded. He glanced between Tiwa and her father, feeling suffocated. For years, he had let business overshadow his personal life. But now, the stakes were higher than ever. He opened his mouth, words tangled on his tongue. Finally, he spoke, his voice hoarse. I can't do that. That's my child. Tiwa's eyes flared. Then you will destroy everything we've built. Everything we stand to gain. The chief slammed a hand on the desk. If you insist on claiming that child, you can forget about this marriage. Or any future business with my family. Daniel rose slowly, fists clenched at his sides. If that's the price I have to pay, then so be it. Tiwa gasped. Chief Allowale glared, his face darkening with anger. Don't be a fool. You'll regret this. Daniel squared his shoulders, a strange calm sweeping over him. He saw, with sudden clarity, that every rung he climbed on the ladder of success had been overshadowed by moral compromises. Not this time. I'm sorry, he said quietly. But I won't abandon my child. With that, he turned and walked out, leaving Tiwa and her father in stunned silence. The heavy doors closed behind him, echoing with finality. For the first time in years, Daniel felt an odd sense of liberation, tinged with terror at the consequences that awaited him. While the corporate and social world buzzed with rumors of the cancelled engagement, Amara quietly continued her routine. She had her final prenatal checkups, worked shifts with the catering company, and attended the occasional painting workshop. Her baby bump had grown considerably, a new life very close to entering the world. One crisp morning, she opened her apartment door to find Daniel standing there with a strained smile. Wordlessly, she let him in. The tension in the air was thicker than usual. She caught sight of the sadness in his eyes. You look tired, she observed. He exhaled. I broke off the engagement. She froze, shock evident on her face. You what? I told Tiwa and her father I wouldn't abandon my child. So, the wedding is off. The deals are off. Everything is off. She stared, unable to mask her surprise. Did you do that because of me? Because of our child, he corrected gently. And because it was the right thing to do. A flurry of emotions crossed Amara's features, relief, confusion, maybe even pity. She sank onto her worn sofa, hands resting on her belly. I never asked you to ruin your life for this. Daniel dropped to one knee beside her, meeting her gaze. You're not ruining my life. You're giving me a chance to do what's right. For once. She swallowed, tears brimming. But what now? The scandal is going to hit you hard. I've seen the headlines. Billionaires' engagement falls apart over secret love child. You'll lose investors, sponsors, everything you've worked for. He nodded, a flicker of pain in his eyes. I know. But some things are more important. I made mistakes, Amara. I won't pretend I didn't. But I'd rather face the fallout than continue living a lie. Her tears finally spilled over. For a moment, Daniel hesitated, then gently took her hand. She didn't pull away this time. The truth is, she whispered, I was going to leave the city. I don't want our child to grow up in the spotlight of your scandals. He stiffened. Leave for where? A friend told me about a community center in a coastal town, a place where I could teach art to children. The pay isn't great, but at least it's peaceful. Daniel's heart twisted. When were you planning to go? Next week. After my final shift at the catering company. I can't stay here, Daniel. I refuse to let our child be hounded by paparazzi. I want a fresh start. He nodded slowly. I understand. Just, let me help you. At least financially, for the baby's sake. She looked away, uncertainty etched on her face. I don't want your pity or guilt money. It's not pity. It's your right. It's our child's right. A long silence passed. She finally exhaled, nodding. All right. But I can't promise anything else, like letting you be there. Pain lanced his chest, but he accepted it. I get it. One step at a time. Outside, a faint breeze rustled through the cracked window. Amara wiped her tears, while Daniel felt the heaviness in the air shift slightly, as if a door had cracked open just enough to let in a sliver of light. Even if she was leaving soon, at least they had this moment, a fragile moment of understanding and reluctant acceptance. In the ensuing days, the media frenzy erupted. Daniel's phone was inundated with voicemails from journalists, ex-partners, and board members. Headlines splashed across newspapers, tech billionaire's wedding cancelled amid illegitimate pregnancy scandal. His biggest sponsor for the IPO withdrew within 48 hours of the story breaking. Other investors followed suit, spooked by the negative publicity. Overnight, Daniel's once inevitable surge in net worth was placed in jeopardy. At a hastily convened board meeting, the tension was palpable. Some directors were livid about the risk to their stock options. Others were nervous about the reputational damage. Daniel sat at the head of the long table, shoulders tense, as the board fired questions at him. One senior member slammed a folder down. We invested in your leadership, Daniel. Now we face a media circus because of your personal choices. How do you plan to manage this? Daniel took a measured breath. Our product is solid. Our financials remain strong. We can weather this storm if we stay focused on the fundamentals. Another director interjected, Chief Olawale has already started pulling strings against us. We can't ignore that. He's discouraging people from supporting our IPO. Daniel grimaced. We proceed with transparency. Yes, my personal life is complicated right now, but it doesn't affect the core viability of our tech solutions. His words rang hollow in the tense silence. Eventually, the board adjourned with no clear plan of action. Daniel stared at the polished conference table after everyone had left, feeling a wave of exhaustion. A text message blinked on his phone. Amara, I'm leaving on Sunday. I've decided to go before the baby arrives. He closed his eyes. She was leaving for good, while his corporate empire teetered on the edge. He typed a reply, Can we talk before you go? He waited, heart hammering, but no immediate response came. Tucking the phone away, he left the boardroom to face the cameras waiting in the lobby. The press clamored for a statement, microphones thrust forward. Daniel gave a brief, composed speech about continuing the company's mission despite personal setbacks. But inside, he felt the heavy weight of a collapsing future. Every step he took felt like it was setting off a landmine, one false move and everything would detonate. Yet even in this chaos, one truth remained clear, he refused to give up on the child he had set out to protect, no matter the cost. While Daniel struggled to keep his company afloat, Tiwa struck with calculated ferocity. Angry and betrayed, she decided to file a lawsuit, accusing him of misleading her and tarnishing her reputation. She demanded emotional damages and even threatened to reveal insider information about his business dealings. The tabloids ate it up. Scorned fiancé sues tech mogul. Photographs from the engagement party were reprinted with sensational headlines. Tiwa's legal team argued that Daniel had entered the engagement under false pretenses, failing to disclose his impending fatherhood. Simultaneously, Chief Olawale leveraged his political influence, quietly lobbying to disrupt Daniel's business permits and block crucial licensing deals. One by one, cracks formed in the foundation of Daniel's empire. Late at night, in his penthouse now devoid of any personal assistant or staff, he had given them all time off to avoid the media circus. Daniel scrolled through the lawsuit's official complaint. The claims were harsh and humiliating. He felt the anger rising in him, yet also guilt, because, in some ways, he had led Tiwa on while harboring a secret. His phone lit up with a new message from his legal counsel, advising him to settle quickly to minimize public damage. Another message from a friend read, "I'm sorry, man. Never seen the chief this vengeful." As the wave of negativity crashed over him, Daniel found himself longing for a simpler life. He recalled how he once lived in a tiny apartment with Amara, fueled by little more than love and ambition. No suits, no interviews, no high-stakes deals, just two dreamers who had each other's backs. A buzz at the door startled him. He opened it to find Tiwa standing there, tears in her eyes and a folder clutched to her chest. "Tiwa," he whispered, stepping aside. She walked in, setting the folder down. "I'm not here to reconcile," she stated, voice trembling. "But I want you to know I never wanted things to get this ugly. My father insists we push forward with the lawsuit." Daniel released a long breath. "You can stop it." She shook her head. "Not anymore. Once my father sets things in motion, they're almost impossible to reverse." He sank onto the sofa, head in his hands. "This is destroying both of us." She paced, tears falling. "You left me humiliated in front of the entire country, Daniel. Did you think I'd just forgive and move on?" "I never wanted to hurt you," he said softly. "I just couldn't abandon my child." She swallowed, looking tormented. "I know. And I hate that I still care about you. But I have to stand by my father. This is my legacy, too." They shared a heavy silence. Then Tiwa turned to leave, wiping her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice betraying a moment of genuine regret. "We're past the point of no return." Daniel watched the door close behind her, his mind swirling with 1,000 emotions, loss, guilt, anger. Tiwa's revenge had begun, and he saw no way to stop it. With each passing day, the life he had built crumbled further, leaving him to wonder if, in the end, this was a strange kind of freedom in disguise. Within a month, Daniel's company lost its biggest deal. Several top engineers resigned, citing uncertainty about the firm's future. The boards of partner corporations distanced themselves. Stock projections plunged. The once celebrated IPO was indefinitely postponed, a blow that sent Daniel's net worth into a downward spiral. In a stark press statement, Daniel stood alone, acknowledging the setbacks. Cameras flashed relentlessly, capturing the worn look on his face. He tried to speak about resilience and pivot strategies, but the words felt hollow. The public's interest was more about the drama than the technological innovations he had once been praised for. Behind the scenes, Daniel closed down expensive departments and let staff go. The once bustling corporate headquarters felt like a ghost town. Each day, the shame of returning to an empty office crushed him further. One evening, after locking up, he stepped outside to find a few paparazzi snapping photos of him. He raised a hand wearily, too drained to care. His phone vibrated with a flurry of missed calls and messages, most of them from lawyers or ex-clients. He noticed one text from Amara, "I'm leaving for the coast tomorrow morning." He stared at the screen, heart pounding. In the midst of losing almost everything, he realized there was one last thing he refused to lose, any chance of being in his child's life. He quickly typed a reply, "Please let me see you off?" But the text went unanswered. Struck by a sudden urgency, Daniel decided to drive straight to her apartment. The roads were unusually quiet, and the fluorescent glow of streetlights bounced off the asphalt. When he reached her building, he knocked on her door, calling her name. No response. He tried the handle, locked. Realizing she might have left early, he felt panic rise. He knew the name of the coastal town from their previous talks. Without a second thought, he turned and headed back to his car. He had nothing to lose anymore, his empire was in ruins. All that mattered now was finding Amara and showing that, despite his failures, he was done running from responsibility. As the city lights receded in his rearview mirror, Daniel felt the faint stirrings of hope and terror. He had no plan beyond seeing Amara, but maybe that was enough. After a long drive, the bustling metropolis gave way to rolling landscapes, palm trees swaying in the coastal breeze. Daniel finally arrived at a tranquil seaside town where the sound of crashing waves mixed with the laughter of fishermen on the shore. He navigated to the community center he believed Amara had mentioned. It was a modest structure made of weathered bricks and a tin roof, painted in cheerful colors. Children's voices echoed from inside, accompanied by a faint strum of guitar. Daniel stepped in cautiously. A few curious kids paused their activities to stare at the suited stranger. He approached a middle-aged woman who seemed to be in charge. "Excuse me," he began, forcing a polite smile. "I'm looking for Amara. She might be teaching art classes here." The woman appraised him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "You must be Daniel," she said, arms folded. "Amara told me a bit about you. She's out on the back porch, painting with some of the older kids." He exhaled, both relieved and anxious. "Thank you." He circled around the building to a small porch overlooking the ocean. Soft laughter drifted on the salty breeze. There was Amara, seated on a stool, paintbrush in hand, guiding a few teenagers as they worked on a large mural. Her belly was now very pronounced, any day away from giving birth. Feeling like an intruder in a scene of calm, Daniel stood quietly until she noticed him. She set down her brush, eyes flickering with surprise, then a guarded wariness. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice low enough not to alarm the teens nearby. He stepped closer, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I came to see you. You left without saying goodbye." She nodded, dismissing the teens to take a break. They scattered, leaving the two adults on the porch. The ocean shimmered behind them, seagulls calling overhead. "You were occupied dealing with your corporate downfall," she said with quiet bluntness. Daniel winced. "I lost almost everything. Or maybe I gave it away. Not sure which." She sighed, glancing at his disheveled appearance. "You look different, tired." He nodded, sliding his hands into his pockets. That life was draining. And I realize now that losing it might have been the only way I'd ever come to my senses. She didn't reply, just studied him. The paint on her hands had stained her fingertips. Her face was calm, peaceful even, despite everything. He continued, voice trembling slightly, "I want to be here. For you, for the baby. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just a chance to not repeat my mistakes." Amara's expression softened momentarily, then she let out a soft breath. "I'll think about it," she whispered, picking up her paintbrush again. It wasn't the warm welcome or immediate reconciliation he might have fantasized about. But it was a tiny opening, a crack in the armor of hurt and resentment. For now, that was enough. Determined to earn Amara's trust rather than demand it, Daniel rented a small, unassuming room in the coastal town, only minutes away from the community center. He avoided flashy gestures or expensive gifts, focusing instead on action. Each morning, he rose early to help the local fishermen carry their nets, learning their trade and listening to their stories of tides and storms. He found the labor surprisingly cathartic, a stark contrast to endless boardroom negotiations. By afternoon, he volunteered at the community center, assisting with basic tasks, stacking chairs, cleaning brushes, handing out snacks. He donated some of his personal funds to repair the center's leaky roof and upgrade the art supplies. When reporters tried to follow him to the coast for a scoop, he refused interviews, wanting no media frenzy to invade this fragile haven. Amara watched all of this from a distance. At first, she was skeptical, accustomed to grand displays of wealth. She assumed Daniel would lose patience with humble daily tasks. But day after day, he showed up, quietly fulfilling whatever needed doing. He never pressured her about the baby, never demanded more than she was willing to offer. One afternoon, Amara ventured into the storeroom to find Daniel rummaging through boxes of donated art supplies. He glanced over. "We need more canvases," he said matter-of-factly. "I can go into town to buy some if you want." She studied him, noting the sweat on his brow, the paint smudges on his hands. He no longer wore designer suits, trading them in for simple t-shirts and jeans. A flicker of appreciation crossed her face. "Thank you," she said softly. "That would be helpful." He nodded, picking up the list of needed items. As he passed her, she added in a quieter tone, "I see what you're doing, Daniel." He paused. "I'm just trying to be better." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Keep at it," she whispered, then walked away. Though they rarely spoke about the future, something had shifted between them. The hostility that once radiated from her had dulled. He noticed small acts of kindness, like when she'd pack an extra lunch for him or subtly suggest a remedy for his sunburn after long hours outside. Through each act of service to the community, Daniel found healing for his own regrets. For the first time in years, he felt grounded, connected to real people, not just profit and loss statements. Little by little, he began to believe that redemption was possible, even for a man who had abandoned the woman he loved. One balmy evening, a gentle ocean breeze drifted through the open windows of the community center. Most of the children had gone home, leaving Daniel and Amara in a quiet moment. She was sorting through donations of paintbrushes, while he cleaned a set of tables. Without looking up, she said softly, "I'm due next week." He set down the rag in his hand. "Yeah, I know. Are you nervous?" She exhaled, placing a paintbrush in a drawer. "A little. But also excited. This baby represents a new chapter." He nodded, heart pounding. "Where will you give birth?" She gave him a sidelong glance. "At the local clinic. It's not fancy, but it's decent. I've talked to the midwife." He drummed his fingers on the table, working up the courage to speak. "I'd like to be there if you want me to. But I'll respect your decision." A flash of conflict crossed her face. Finally, she set aside the brushes and turned to face him fully. "Daniel, you've changed. I can't pretend I don't see that. And I appreciate what you've done here, not just for me, but for everyone at the center." He stepped closer. "I'll never be able to repay the hurt I caused. But I want to keep trying. For as long as it takes." She swallowed, eyes shimmering with tears. "I'm still scared you'll leave again. When life gets tough or when a new big opportunity appears." He gently took her hands in his, careful not to overstep. "I don't want to be that man anymore. I can't promise there won't be tough days ahead. But I can promise I won't run from them, or you." For a moment, she let herself rest in the warmth of his hands, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Maybe that's enough," she whispered. He pulled her into a delicate embrace, the baby bump pressing between them, a silent testament to the life they now shared, regardless of the past. Amara's shoulders shook with quiet sobs, and Daniel felt his own tears threatening to spill. In that moment, the distance between them, years of betrayal, bitterness, and longing, seemed to dissolve. It wasn't a grand declaration of love or a definitive reunion. But it was genuine closeness, perhaps the first step toward true forgiveness. A week later, at dawn, Daniel was roused by frantic knocking on his rented room's door. He opened it to find a teenage girl from the community center, breathless. "Amara's gone into labor. She asked for you." His heart surged into his throat. He threw on clothes and raced to the clinic. There, he found Amara in a small, tidy delivery room, midwives bustling around. She was soaked in sweat, her face contorted with pain. He approached her side, unsure if she truly wanted him there. But when their eyes met, she grasped his hand with surprising strength. "Don't you dare leave," she whispered through clenched teeth. He nodded fiercely. "I won't." Hours passed in a haze of intense contractions and encouraging words from the midwives. Amara squeezed Daniel's hand until it turned numb. He whispered reassurances, tears brimming at the sight of her struggle and bravery. Finally, a sharp cry pierced the air. The midwife gently lifted a tiny, wailing baby, a baby girl with a full head of hair. Emotions flooded Daniel, too powerful to contain. He laughed and cried simultaneously, every fiber of his being overwhelmed by awe. Amara, exhausted, looked at him with a tired smile. "She's perfect, isn't she?" He nodded, leaning to kiss her forehead. "Absolutely perfect." The midwife placed the baby in Amara's arms. She cradled their daughter, and after a moment, she tilted the child toward Daniel. Nervous, elated, he gently took the infant in his arms. Her tiny fingers curled around his thumb, and in that instant, he felt a sense of purpose that dwarfed every business deal he'd ever made. A few days later, Amara sat propped up in a chair at the community center, the baby nestled in her arms. Daniel stood before her, looking uncharacteristically anxious. He cleared his throat and spoke softly, "I wanted to ask you something." She raised an eyebrow, brushing her fingertips over the baby's cheek. "Go ahead." He took a deep breath, pulling out a small notebook, no diamond ring, no paparazzi, just a worn notebook. "I wrote down a promise," he said, handing it to her. Inside, in his own scribbled handwriting, he had listed vows: to stay by her side, to support their child's dreams, to value love over ambition, to never run away again. He knelt before her, the baby cooing softly. "I guess this is my proposal," he explained, voice trembling. "Will you let me build a life with you and our daughter, no more running?" Amara's eyes brimmed with tears. She pressed the notebook to her heart. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, a smile, soft, hopeful, tugged at her lips. She didn't give a verbal answer, but when Daniel reached out to hold her free hand, she entwined her fingers with his. In the hush of the coastal breeze, their daughter let out a tiny laugh, as if celebrating the promise of a new legacy, one built on genuine commitment rather than empty words. Whether or not they'd have a formal wedding soon didn't matter. They had each other, they had their child, and they had the second chance neither thought possible. And for Daniel Adeyemi, stripped of wealth but rich in the love he had rediscovered, that was more than he ever dared hope for. End of story.